What really happened to Max Verstappen on the opening day of his Zandvoort GP? What looked like a simple pit exit mistake ended in a crash that exposed the Red Bull's weaknesses. Is Verstappen losing patience with his own car? Before we go any further, tell me in the comments, do you think Max can still win this weekend? Stay until the end, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel. During the first free practice session at Zandvoort, all eyes were on Max Verstappen. It was his return from the international break, and he was racing on home soil, surrounded by a veritable tide of orange in the stands. The pressure was enormous, but so were the expectations. The fans wanted to see their idol dominate from the first minute. However, the reality was very different. The key moment came right at the end of the session. After the checkered flag waved, Verstappen attempted a practice start, a standard procedure to test the car's reaction at the start. What was supposed to be a simple test ended with the front brakes locking up. The car lost stability under braking and ended up straight in the gravel at turn 1. In a matter of seconds, the driver who usually inspires the most confidence was stopped in the least desirable place, off the track and unable to continue. The image went viral almost instantly. Verstappen, in his own Grand Prix, had to get out of the car and walk back to the pits under the astonished gaze of his home crowd. It wasn't a heavy crash or an accident with costly damage, but it was a symbolic moment. It showed that even the most dominant driver of recent years can be exposed by a car that doesn't respond as it should. The most worrying thing wasn't the excursion into the gravel itself, but what it revealed. Max had previously expressed that the RB21 makes him wary of braking at low speeds. And this episode confirmed it. After the accident in FP1, what caught the most attention wasn't just Verstappen's one-off mistake, but the RB21's overall performance. The car once again displayed the same shortcomings it has been experiencing since the start of the season. Understeer in medium and high-speed corners, in addition to a clear lack of downforce that limits its potential compared to its direct rivals. This deficit was reflected in the first practice times. Verstappen finished in 6th place, almost a second behind Lando Norris. For a driver accustomed to fighting for pole and setting the pace since Friday, finishing within that distance is a clear sign that something is wrong. Most striking is that even cars that usually battle in the midfield were ahead of the Red Bull, an image that reinforces the idea that the RB21 isn't performing as expected. The situation became even more complicated when looking at what happened in the second free practice. Verstappen wasn't the only one complaining about the car. His teammate Yuki Tsunoda also suffered lockups and spins under heavy braking, confirming that the problems don't depend on a particular driver's driving style, but rather on a structural weakness in the car's design. When two drivers with such different styles experience the same difficulties, the diagnosis becomes clear. The car has a fundamental flaw that Red Bull has yet to resolve. This mediocre performance breaks with the dynamic we've seen in previous years. Red Bull usually arrived at each circuit with a balanced and dominant car, but at Zandvoort the feeling is completely different. While McLaren and Mercedes seem to have taken a step forward with stable and consistent cars, the RB21 is forced to fight to stay in the points. The most frustrating thing for Verstappen is that, despite the multiple configurations and settings tested, the problem remains. He himself made it clear he doesn't expect the situation to change overnight. And that recognition is important because it shows that, at least for now, Red Bull doesn't have a magic bullet. This leaves the team in a difficult position, trying to get the most out of a car that isn't up to par, while rivals continue to grow and pull away in pure performance. Aware that the RB21 had been suffering from the same problems since the start of the season, Red Bull decided to introduce a specific update for the Zandvoort GP. Unlike other teams that opted for more comprehensive changes, the team focused on a single component, the front wing. The modification consisted of a lengthening with wider chord flaps designed to increase downforce on the front end. The idea was clear: to improve corner entry and reduce the understeer that has caused Verstappen and his teammate so many headaches. This decision makes a lot of sense when you look at the Zandvoort layout. The circuit is full of medium and high-speed corners, sections where the lack of grip on the front axle becomes a critical issue. By improving downforce in this area, the car should respond better to turns and offer greater precision on corner entry. For a driver as aggressive as Verstappen, who bases much of his style on braking late and turning decisively, this update represents an opportunity to regain some confidence in the car. However, it's not all advantages. Increasing the load on the front of the car often comes at a cost: increased aerodynamic drag. This means the car can lose speed on long straights, an aspect that isn't as decisive at Zandvoort as it is at other circuits, but that could still make the difference in key moments, such as defending or overtaking. Furthermore, there is a risk of the car becoming unbalanced if the load distribution between the front and rear axles isn't properly balanced, which could lead to traction problems when exiting corners. The update, therefore, isn't a definitive solution, but rather a strategic fix for a circuit with very specific characteristics. Red Bull is looking to gain time and keep Verstappen as competitive as possible while working on more in-depth solutions for the second half of the season. What's interesting is that, according to some analyses in specialized forums and media, this wing could have a dual purpose, serving both the present and gathering useful data for the development of the 2026 car. If this is true, Red Bull's move would be smarter than it seems, using a difficult weekend to prepare for the future. What's clear is that the team is opting for small steps rather than massive revolutions. But the big question is whether these one-off improvements will be enough to give Verstappen the confidence he needs for his home Grand Prix, or whether the Dutchman will have to settle for damage control against rivals who appear to be better prepared. After the first 2 sessions at Zandvoort, Max Verstappen was very clear when speaking to the media. Instead of being explosive or directly blaming the team, he adopted a cool and matter-of-fact tone. He acknowledged that they are still stuck with the same old problems and that, despite trying multiple setups and adjustments, the root of the problem hasn't been resolved. For a driver who is used to being at the top of his game, admitting that he doesn't expect a major change overnight reflects a mix of contained frustration and resignation to the RB21's current situation. His statements also reveal a very particular trait of his personality: the ability to channel pressure. Instead of letting his anger get the better of him after the FP1 accident and the car's poor performance, Max asserted that there's no point in getting frustrated. According to him, the most important thing is to invest that energy into understanding the car and working with the engineers to find improvements. This doesn't mean he's satisfied, but rather that he's choosing to show patience in public, even though the pressure on the team is likely much greater behind closed doors. These words also serve as a message to Red Bull. Verstappen not only exposes the technical problems, he also sets a clear line. He knows the team isn't at the level of McLaren or Mercedes and wants to demonstrate that he's doing his part. At the same time, he shows a certain maturity by not igniting a media crisis right at his home Grand Prix. For such a competitive driver, staying calm and not attacking the team in front of microphones is a calculated strategy. Verstappen's reaction, then, is twofold. On the one hand, he acknowledges the limitations and accepts that there will be no immediate solution. On the other, he maintains hope that with overnight work and minor adjustments, the car's balance can be improved for qualifying. In fan communities and specialized forums, many suggest that the team is using this weekend at Zandvoort not only to race, but also to test components that could be part of the 2026 car. There is particular talk of the modified front wing as a part that would serve a dual purpose: slightly improve current performance and, at the same time, gather crucial information for future technical regulations. This theory makes sense, especially since other top teams have chosen not to introduce major changes at this stage of the season. What's interesting is that this type of speculation only fuels the feeling that Red Bull is thinking beyond the present. For some fans, this means the team is willing to sacrifice some of its current performance to secure an advantage when the new regulations come into effect. However, for critics, it's a dangerous sign. It could be interpreted as a total lack of commitment to the current season, especially considering that McLaren and Mercedes seem to have found much greater consistency. If Red Bull loses ground at this point, the pressure on Verstappen will inevitably increase. In addition to aerodynamic components, there is also talk of the team experimenting with suspension components to correct the tendency toward understeer. This aspect is key because it has been a constant complaint from drivers since the start of the year. Solving this underlying problem could make a difference not only at Zandvoort, but at any circuit on the calendar. And although there are no official confirmations, leaks and technical comments from analysts reinforce the idea that Red Bull is testing solutions more quietly than it appears. The direct consequence of all these rumors is clear: they create uncertainty around the team's priorities. Is Red Bull really focusing on giving Verstappen a competitive car to win now, or is it using the season as a laboratory for the future? Team Principal Laurent Mekies bluntly acknowledged, the car doesn't have enough pace to compete head-to-head with McLaren or Mercedes. This honesty contrasts with more optimistic statements from the past and reflects a more pragmatic approach within the team. The goal, at least this weekend, is to minimize damage and salvage as many points as possible. The Dutchman knows that the car doesn't allow him to dream of dominating from qualifying, but he also understands that every detail can make a difference. His ability to adapt to adverse conditions and squeeze the most out of the car becomes Red Bull's main weapon. If the team can find a setup that allows Verstappen to feel more comfortable, he could take a step forward in qualifying and put himself in a position to fight for the podium. Mekies made it clear that there are no quick fixes or miracles. Structural changes to a Formula One car take time, and what is learned in these difficult races will be the foundation for future success. This speech aims to calm expectations and remind everyone that the season is still long. However, the public and the media expect immediate results, even more so at a venue as special as Zandvoort. Ultimately, the immediate future of Verstappen and Red Bull in this Grand Prix lies in a delicate balance between realism and ambition. They know they don't have the fastest car, but they still have a driver capable of extracting the most difficult situations. The big question is whether this combination will be enough to turn a weekend full of doubts into a solid result. The Zandvoort Grand Prix began with an unexpected blow for Verstappen, and what seemed like a simple accident in practice ended up revealing a much deeper reality. Red Bull no longer has the dominant car it had in years past. The front wing update, while a step in the right direction, doesn't solve the root of the problem. And Verstappen knows this perfectly well. That's why his statements are so revealing. He doesn't let frustration get the better of him in front of the microphones, but he doesn't raise false expectations either. His attitude is that of a driver who understands he's racing uphill, in a car that doesn't allow him to show his best, right on the most symbolic stage of the year for him. This mix of determination and resignation creates a climate of uncertainty that few would have imagined at the start of the season. What's shocking here isn't just the accident or the poor performance in practice, but what it could mean for the near future. Verstappen remains the heart of Red Bull, but the team seems torn between solving the problems of the present or preparing the car of the future. What happens at Zandvoort could mark a turning point in his relationship with the team. What's at stake isn't just a home result, but the confidence of a champion who demands a car worthy of his talent.